Today I want to talk about Wayfinder, now known as Wayfinder Echoes. It's hard to know where to even start with this one because talking about this game is hard, and that's mostly because the game carries a lot of baggage. So before we get into the game review itself, I feel like we need to take a quick history lesson about the game and how it got to this point. It's important to know because it does play a part in how I ultimately review this game. So Wayfinder launched in August of 2023, and the game was meant to be an MMO-lite action-adventure game. The game was developed by Airship Syndicate, a studio most recently known for making The Ruined King. Wayfinder was published by Digital Extremes, a studio most known for creating the very popular free-to-play game Warframe. The collaboration between the studios intended to have Digital Extremes handle and help Airship Syndicate with the more live service elements of the game, as Airship didn't really have the experience in creating that type of game. Live service games are almost always a bit rocky at launch, but Wayfinder's in particular was just a catastrophe. Wayfinder was intended to be free to play, but the idea was to open it up in an early access period for people who purchased Founders Packs. These ranged from $20 to $150. Each of them giving certain perks, but all of them granted early access to the game. Whether it be due to lack of preparation or experience, the game just didn't really work on launch. The influx of players was so large it broke the servers, and the game's queue system just didn't work as intended, making the game largely unplayable for the majority of people actually just wanting to play the game. While the players who somehow did make it in would just experience crashes and disconnections that would just throw them back into the broken queue system. And while the queue system was eventually fixed, the damage was already done to the game's reception. It took like almost 2 days before the game was actually really playable, and the golden window of like a good launch was just squandered. This may have been the biggest failure that hurt the game, but it wasn't what killed it in the end, because the game itself was just kind of meh. Speaking from my own experience, I racked up about 30 hours in the original Wayfinder release, and that is including queue times though, so I'm not sure how much I actually played the game. But in that time, I just thought it was only okay. The first and biggest problem I had with this game was the lag. And because the game was essentially an MMO with an always online service, I had to play it with ping. And this just made the game feel clunky, especially with how action-oriented the combat was. Everything just had a delay to it. Attacks, parrying, dodging, even all of the menus. It was just rough to play, but it was still kind of fun. And despite the game being an MMO, I found myself just playing alone for most of the time. The few times I did dungeons with other players, they would run ahead and complete the dungeon while I wanted to explore so I could collect stuff. And so in the end, I just stopped playing with other people and just found myself just soloing them. And the only times I willingly partied with other players was for boss dungeons in which I just really couldn't complete alone. Even when I did try to party with other people, I found myself with AFK players or people who were massively under-geared for the scenario, and it was just taking me back to my experience raiding in, well, any game, but it most resembled WoW, which was easily the worst. The majority of the reason why Wayfinder was hard to play with others is that there just wasn't much direct communication. The only way I was going to be able to play with other people and get the communication I want was if I played with friends, but the game was nowhere near in good enough shape to convince friends to buy in, because Wayfinder, even when it was working as intended, it was just an unfinished, unfocused, grindy mess. The grind to get literally anything in the game was really high. The vagueness of all the quests and how to complete them was just frustrating. There was this quest chain that required me to find the quest giver in a dungeon, do his quest line, and then he bugged out and didn't show up after beating the boss when he was meant to, which led to me searching around the game and re-entering dungeons for an hour, like trying to find him. This on top of the fact that items just straight up having no proper item descriptions for what they did or if they were even important. The thing that the original Wayfinder release failed the most in was the community aspect of the game. I personally feel like that's like one of the most important factors to an MMO, and maybe that's just because I come from a background of playing like a metric fuck ton of RuneScape. This is just something that I look for in an MMO, and like when Wayfinder felt like it didn't have any, the grind just got too much to me and I just never launched the game again. I can't speak for anyone else's experience with the game, but the daily player count fell very quickly, and by October of 2023, the game was barely hitting like 1,000 peak daily player counts. And this is around about the time that Digital Extremes pulled out of the game, terminating their agreement with Airship Syndicate and closing down the publishing arm of their studio. Airship Syndicate retained the rights to Wayfinder, but they had no publisher for the game. Now, according to an interview on SkillUp's channel, the leads at Airship tried to find a new publisher, but nobody would bite, which led the developers to pivot the direction of the game to save it. The idea would be to take out the MMO live service elements, the microtransactions, and make the game playable offline with the optional co-op with friends through peer-to-peer. The game would no longer be free to play, but sold as a premium title for $25. And listen, this wasn't the game we were promised, but in a perfect world, the game would have been an instant 10 out of 10 success at launch, gotten 1 million concurrent players for the rest of time, and everyone would have lived happily ever after with an amazing video game. What we have here is a bad situation, and if this was truly the only way the game could have been saved, then I think that just has to do. It's not a perfect solution by any means. The people who bought in at $150 are now getting a game at $25 with little compensation for a game that they didn't really want. And that sucks, but these people also paid $150 for what was meant to be a free-to-play game. And look, I'm a big proponent for consumer rights, and even though I think that buying into a video game at such a high price is a very silly decision, these people still deserve their money back. Now, I say that as someone who bought into the game at, just $50, but I wouldn't want to seek my money back, mostly because I got my time out of the original release, and I can kind of live with the fact that I paid for a video game and just got a mediocre product. I've bought some really shit video games in my time, and Wayfinder wouldn't make my top 10 or even my top 20. But because I bought in the first time, I get early access to Wayfinder's second go around, and the game will be launching on June 11th, and today I'm making it my mission to tell you if it's going to be worth the new asking price. So let's get into Wayfinder Echoes. So when starting, I picked the same character as last time I played, so I can get a feel for how different the game would play, and I've got to say I was a little surprised to find out that the first hour of the game was almost identical how it used to be, but the most obvious difference was how the game felt, and goddamn, it is so much better without the lag. The combat actually feels responsive, the abilities are fun, the movement feels good, the performance sucks a little. I'm finding a lot of frame freezing and slowdown is pretty common, both on my PC and even on my Steam Deck as well, which the game is supposed to be verified for. This is only really a problem in the open world. Dungeons for the most part seem to just run fine, except for one time I ran one of the dungeons with the gold imbuement, and it was pretty choppy in that one, but it's never been at a point that it's unplayable. Going forward, I feel like performance needs to be one of the main issues that Airship Syndicate needs to address. The further I got into Wayfinder Echoes, the more I found myself just thinking, has anything really changed? I mean, sure, the world feels a little more empty without the other players running around, but I never really saw that many people even when the multiplayer was a thing in the original release. And like running around the world, you can really tell that it was made to accommodate more players, because now it just feels too big. I mean, it was already kind of too big, but now its scale just doesn't serve much of a purpose. And yeah, it looks nice, but I kind of expect if the map is going to be this big, then there needs to be more reasons for general exploration. And questing, it also kind of still sucks. They're more or less the same as they used to be. It's just a lot of running around and talking to people and quick traveling back and forth to talk to different people and handing in quests. It just doesn't feel rewarding. And look, at the moment you might be finding yourself asking the question like, what do I even like about this game? And I really like the combat. I like the weapons, and I like how different all the Wayfinders uniquely feel to play. And I like the fact that I can now play them rather than grinding to unlock them. Like, at its core, this game during combat is what keeps me playing. It is a solid rock to base the game off of, and when you're running through dungeons and the action is a little more compact and there's less time between, different combat encounters, and that's when the game really starts to shine for me. And like, building off that, I also really like the freedom and the depth that comes with leveling up abilities, talents, echoes, and affinity. It feels like there are a lot of different ways you can build out your character, and I really, really like that. I like that you can use any weapon with any character, and it sometimes borders on the point of being a little too much. I also think it kind of finds that balance between being too much, but also being super rewarding for people who like build crafting and min-maxing. In conclusion, conclusion, Wayfinder Echoes is a very bloated game. There is a ton of loot in the game, but it's almost always useless. There is too much running back and forth between quests, even with fast travel, and the quests themselves are mostly bland and boring. But at its very core, there is a fun combat system with a ton of dungeon replayability and difficulty scaling that carries the enjoyment of the game on its back. And it was the same back when the original Wayfinder released, and the game as a whole is fine. But for a budget priced game, fine is good. A lot of the game's major problem seems to stem from the fact that it was meant to be something else. And had Wayfinder from the start been designed around a single player or optional co-op game with this combat system in mind, just stripping down a lot of the unneeded elements of the game, then we wouldn't have these weird conflicting design choices, and I think we could have had a real winner here. But what we have is, it's fine. And if I paid $25 for this game, then I'd be satisfied with my purchase. What I'd like to see from Airship Syndicate moving forward is a more concrete roadmap for what they're going to do with this game and what a 1.0 launch will truly look like. They say they're going to release a 1.0 in fall, but I want to know what that 1.0 is. Because this game was already rushed to market once, and look where that got us. I don't want this game to be left in a it's good enough state. When I play Wayfinder, I see a lot of, what could have been. I've played this game maybe less than half of what I played the original release, but had probably twice the fun. The original release of this game had the potential to be something better. And when I'm battling a fun boss, I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't this be more fun as a hard raid for 8 players? But then I think of how miserable the game was when it was a live service. The grinding was just ridiculously unfun, the server issues sucked, and the ping was awful. Wayfinder Echoes, in my opinion, is Wayfinder in the best state that it has ever been. And I think that new players coming into this game will have a fun time. I think that the reception from the old players will be much more mixed. Personally, I like it, but yeah, I'm a little disappointed. But if you look at the circumstances surrounding the entire game, what we got was much, much better than nothing, which is what it could have been. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and if you are new, please consider subscribing. If you've played Wayfinder, and especially if you've played the old release, let me know what you thought in the comments. The next video will be the Summer Games Fest roundup, and it's going to be a mammoth one, so stick around for that one next week. Thanks to my YouTube members, Controlled, Killer, and Dr. Hoovian 2. If you feel like my content is worth supporting financially, the option is there, and while I can't offer too much at the moment, you do get a little badge next to your name in the comments, and you'll get your name in the credits of each video as a personal thank you. I also want to thank Jack Mac for helping me with some of the editing stuff recently. Your help has been amazing, thank you. And I also want to thank all of you today because I just passed 1,000 subscribers, and that is absolutely amazing. The growth of this channel over the last couple of months has been insane, and the feedback has been so overwhelming, so thank you all so much. End things off, I also have a community Discord server which is free to enter, where you can suggest videos and chat with me if you want, and I also have a Steam curator page if you're interested in diving into more of my video game takes that might not make it into a full video. Links to everything in the description of the video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. See ya.